So we're now going to move right into a panel that speaks to placing people living with NCDs at the center of all we do. And I'd like to ask my co-chair, Tara Lisa Persaud, who is technical advisor to the HCC, Our Views, Our Voices, Anthony Castillo, Glennis Beaton, and Heather. Where's Heather? Heather Renault. And so as we begin to wind down and we begin to see the tape at the end of 2.5 days of very intense activity, in many respects, this panel is probably the most important of all, because this panel really speaks to what is the real purpose of the entire exercise, and that is trying to prevent and control NCDs. And so in many respects, the perspective has been one of a perspective from professionals and quasi-professionals and the private sector and from civil society organizations. But what we thought was very important now is to have the experience and the views of those persons living with NCDs. And as we look to plan this initiative, we thought we would go out in the highways and byways and try to identify persons living with NCDs. But on reflection, we felt, well, the persons living with NCDs are here among us. And so therefore, let us start with hearing the message from our own individuals and persons suffering from NCDs. And by way of introduction, I can continue to develop this point, but I'm going to resist it, except to say that recall one of the priorities, in fact, the first priority that we discussed yesterday, that we're taking to the UN high-level meeting, was the whole issue of putting persons first. So we're going to start off with hearing the stories, and I'm going to start with Glennis. Tell us your story, Glennis. Share with us.
So, as you just heard, my name is Glennis. I was diagnosed at age 22. My blood sugar was 270, and the doctor in charge took me from 270 to 50. So I was out. He came the next day and he said, they had to give me sugar via the vein, and he said, glad to have you back with us. I'm discharging you. You will use either 5, 15, or 10 insulin, and you should get a number. I had no glucometer. Diabetes was new, so I moved from one private hospital to the next. I was in that hospital for 2 weeks, testing, going, coming. When we were finished, the doctor says, well, you're not type 1 because you're 22 years old. You must be type 2. Mind you, my father was diabetic and diagnosed at age 35, and he's on insulin till daylight now. He would never use a tablet. So I went home. I tried the insulin. Of course, I was more hypoed up. And then we tried tablets, which never worked. And I dropped diabetes from my agenda for 5 years. I never used a tablet. I never used nothing. I would have had enough. I was no longer diabetic. In 2005, I was invited to a meeting in Jamaica, and it was for non-medical professionals in diabetes education. That was my turning point. The damages was already done to my body anyway. and I started to become compliant. From that year onward, I attended the ADA scientific session till day like today to become my own doctor because I did not trust the doctors. Sorry, no offense meant. Young married woman, diabetic, problems start. Psychologically, just thinking diabetes was disgusting. I grew up 135 pounds. So the low waist pants, the J-Lo looking looks, I had. I'm now on insulin, so I now carry something I call Becky. That's the high stomach. That when the doctors see me, oh, Glennis, you're overweight. You need to drop weight. A diabetic never wants to hear that. You don't know the fight they have in trying to lose weight, trying to eat correct, and maintaining that balance. I have a full-time job, mining, and my days are from 6 in the morning to sometime 9 in the night. So don't tell me about exercise. I've been up and down. Secondly, there's nothing like sex on the list when you go to a diabetic doctor or any doctor. It's taboo. You don't want to talk about it. I'm married for the second time. Maybe that's what caused my first husband to leave me, because sex wasn't important. It was disgusting. I have to literally put a CD in my head when we have to have sex, because I have to think sex. I have to engage my brain in sex. And that's because I would have had neuropathy problems. I cannot lift this arm too high because it now suffers from adhesive capsulitis. God knows when it can get back. And then my husband isn't diabetic, and he's young, he's good looking, he's better looking than me, and he's short. So you can just imagine. So now the mental issues.
Glennis, I just love you. I'm about to cry. Honest to God.
No, I can't cry. And then in 2016, I lost my sister to a chronic disease. She was hypertensive for 30 years and never knew. Nobody told her. And 7 days after, I lost my eldest daughter. God knows, I tell myself, I had enough of living. This was more than I could bear. In 1 week, how do I cope? I have become a work junkie. I work and I work and I think less of diabetes. I take my energies into my job. I know you sit there and you wonder, but this is a young lady, I'm half century, think about that. And she's talking about working and coping with diabetes. You have to find something to cope with diabetes. I will never be a diabetic survivor. Cancer survivors, yes, but not a diabetic survivor. I will die of a complication of diabetes. And just think about that. I'm thinking, I want the best of death. Close my eyes and die. That might never happen. I might be fighting for my life till I die. Mentally, diabetics do not wish to sit and hear you tell them what to eat, what not to eat, how to weigh. Every time I pass, somebody says, oh, you are so fat. Or they see me drink a sweet drink. Aren't you diabetic? But I can tell you at 12 o'clock, my fingers start getting cold. I start getting numb. And HCC meeting is encouraging that every meeting since I'm here. So I have to have a sweet drink. We also use mechanism in our brains for when people tell you things, how you respond. I'm at a breakfast with my mother, my biological mother, and she says to me, Glennis, your husband just say you walk back to front. I said, yes, my mother. You can't have it in the front yard and in the backyards too. You have to have it one place. So people tell you cruel things as diabetics. And you always have to have that backup. If you're too strong, it's a negative, because you always have to portray that strength out there. Nobody wants to see Glennis cry, but there are days when I love to sit and cry. And I can tell you, my friends sitting in the audience sometimes stop those days when she calls to say, Glennis, the Diabetic Association did not submit their report. I'm waiting. My documents are waiting here. I said, look, Kavita, me I hear from you nor CMO. Don't call me. Because I work full time, and these people just decided I work for the association. But that gives me the impetus to go yet a day longer. I look deep down in my guts, my belly, to find one day to live every day. And that's my story.
Put people first. Does anyone, after hearing all of this, have a sense of saying, well, I wasted my time coming here for 2.5 days? No, because fundamentally, this is what we are about right here, specifically what we just heard. Let's hear from Heather, who is going to share a different kind of experience.
Hi, I'm going to share a different kind of experience with you guys. I am from a family that is severely affected by NCDs. I lost my dad last year, but that was not our first encounter with NCDs. When I was 14 years old, I remembered my mom coming home and she said, I wanted to talk to you. So I said, what is it, Mom? And she said, last night your dad found a lump in my breast. So I said, well, that doesn't mean anything. Go to the doctor, you should be fine. Well, she went to the doctor back home. Back then, breast cancer was a taboo. There were not many ladies with breast cancer. The founder of the Cancer Society of Belize, her name is Miss Juliet Soberanis, and she was one of my mom's very good friends. And at that time, that was the only lady we knew who had cancer. She used to dress up like a clown, and as little girls, we used to go out in the community and clean the garbage and feed the poor and help the sick, all the while not knowing she was a cancer survivor. It was not until she got really, really sick that we knew that she was a cancer survivor. And when my mom got diagnosed, Miss Juliet was literally on her bed, and she talked my mom through that time. Back home, there was no doctors to do mastectomies. There was no chemotherapies. There was no radiation. So what do you do in a third world country? I have to thank God at that time. My father, he's a doctor of educational studies. He was a very high-ranking government official, flew my family out to Miami. My mom had to go in for emergency surgery. She removed both her breasts, but she survived breast cancer. We came back, and I remember the first time she showed me her breast. She just had a chest with 2 huge scars, and she cried. And she said, my daughter, I want you to take care of yourself, because she's from a family of 5 girls, and 4 of her sisters have died. I have one aunt that died from old age that lived until 104. But her daughter, my cousin, died from invasive inflammatory breast cancer in 2 months' time. And right now I have my other aunt daughter, who is 84 years old and have been diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. So it's very, very prevalent in my family. Now I go over to my dad. Looking at my dad taking care of my mom, he was the strength of our family. He taught us to be strong. Remember going to the farms, planting, pushing us to be very athletic, all the time not knowing that he was a hypertensive patient from the time he was 22 years old. From he went to graduate school, they recognized that he had a nephritis of the kidney, meaning one kidney was smaller than the other. And he started with hypertension, and from he was a little boy, everybody back home, although he's doctor, they call him Chubby, because he's chubby from he's little, and he held that name until he died. So he maintained that weight, and I remember going to college, looking up at my dad, and he came to Jamaica. This was our first encounter with Jamaica. My dad was here for a conference, and somebody from the conference called back home. And I answered the phone because my mom was in the States doing follow-up treatment. And they said, do you know if Dr. Renner came on the flight to Jamaica for the Ministry of Education conference? I said, yes. I said, I dropped him at the airport. So I was worried. They called back and they said, but it's strange that he did not show up and he's to present. I said, well, can you guys kindly go to his room and check to see if he's there? And the hotel went to the room, and by the time they had gotten to the room, he had passed out. His luggage did not come in, and his blood pressure medication was in the luggage. And his blood pressure went exceedingly high, and he had a stroke in that room. My mom was in the States. I was the only one in Belize going to university at that time. I remember calling my brother that lives in Miami, and we flew down here. The doctors here told us that it was a very slim chance that he would survive. As a family, we made that decision that we would take him back to the United States. My dad was in that hospital for 4 months. He had to learn to walk. He had to learn to talk again. He had to learn to feed himself. From a man that has such a huge stature to be reduced to that, it pained us, and we had to watch that for 4 months straight. Thank God that he got through it, but not without the financial bills. It took almost all of our family's savings, over $100 and something thousand. The insurance cut him off after that. There was no more insurance. My mom had no insurance. There was no support for anybody else. My dad retired from the government service, and after those years, he put all his energies into his farm and living a very comfortable life. He exercised, he went to church, and he served his community. And I remember last year, in 2016, he called me a day I was going to a funeral for a cancer patient. And he said, Baby H, do you think you can go to the farm with me today? And I said, no, Dad. I said, I was a little bit busy. I said, but I'm going to this funeral. I said, but make sure you're home when I get back. He did not wait. He went on the road and he went to our farm, deal with the workman. The workman said that he came and he told him that he was going to make chicken because he always used to get at us for eating unhealthy. He used to say, remember I'm hypertensive? Remember you have cancer in your family? You cannot continue to live like this. I love what you call the greasy China chicken. I know you guys have Popeyes and all kind of stuff here. We can literally get a greasy bag of chicken for $3. It's the best fried chicken you've ever tasted with some fries, but it's not good for you. So I used to always push that kind of eating. Anyways, that evening I remember I came home and I had a greasy chicken. And it was about 6 o'clock and I said, let me call my dad because we have a relationship that every day we talk or we text each other if we're not around. 6:30, he still didn't answer the phone. I said, well, okay, maybe they're tired and he just couldn't get to the phone. He'll call me back. I remember that evening I was just very uneasy. I called the neighbor. He said, no, your dad is fine. I see the truck in the driveway. And he walked inside with the food to cook for the workman. And he said, we're going out for 5 o'clock in the morning. I said, okay. I said, you sure you saw it? He said, yes, I saw the truck. And he said hi, but he went inside. And that Sunday morning, we went to church. And in the church service, one of my family members showed up. And he said, Heather, you guys need to get to Bamapan real quick. That's outside of the city. They had found my dad in the house. And how they had found it was because he was cooking and he caught a stroke in the night. Going to the refrigerator, that entire kitchen was burnt up. Smoke was coming through the windows, and that's how the neighbor recognized that something was wrong. They broke the door, called the paramedics, and they got him out to the nearest hospital that was. It was a very small hospital, not a regional hospital that is able to take care of stroke patients. It took 2 weeks to stabilize him. Got him back to the city. He stayed in the hospital an additional month. But this time the doctors told us, there's not much more we can do. We took him home. Imagine a man that went through all that. For 6 months, for the last 6 months of his life, he could not walk. The entire left side of his body was dead. He could not do anything for himself. He looked at you, he smiled, and he made brief comments. And I think he knew that his time was coming near, because the morning when he died, he said, I wonder if you can stay home today. He said, I want some garnaches. I said, don't worry. I said, I'm going to get that corn and that beans and I'm going to make you garnaches. And I came home quite happy going to make him garnaches. And him and my mom was lying in bed, holding hands. My mom had the control and he had the water bottle hooked. And I thought they were watching the TV because the TV was on. Both of them were sleeping. I went over and I kissed my mom. And I went around to kiss my dad. And all I saw was the white of his eyes. And that was it. I called the ambulance and it was over. And dramatically, that's the exact same way that his mother died. The entire left side of the body went dead and she had a stroke in her sleep.
Thanks.
And that's my story.
Wow. So Anthony is going to share his story at very short notice. So I've told him that, you know,
keep it
doesn't
short.
need to get into a lot of detail.
Thanks for Trevor. It was at age 34 for me when I was diagnosed with the condition diabetes. During this time, my mom was living with the condition and my younger sister. I come from a family of 5. I'm the eldest male in the family. I was living in Belize City. My mom and sister were living in the districts, 100 plus miles away from Belize City. I could recall at one point I visited with my mom and I met my sister with a pitcher of water, cold water, ice water. And I said, why are you drinking so much water, cold water? Like you're having a hangover? She said, no, not really, but this is what this diabetes does with you, right? Like you're having, you're familiar with the term goma? Anybody else in the Caribbean use goma? It's a hangover. After consuming large amount of alcohol the following day, all you want is water. And I sort of teased her, well, so bad for you with this diabetes. During this time, I knew nothing about diabetes. Although my mom was living in the condition, my sister was living in the condition, I knew nothing about it. So I was in Belize City, living my life as per usual, until one day I found myself losing weight, drastically losing weight. I have always been a person who loved exercise, but I was losing much too much weight. This was also the time when crack cocaine was being introduced to Belize City, into the country of Belize, right? And one of the side effects, I understand, you start losing weight when you use crack cocaine, right? Then HIV and AIDS came on the scene as well. And they also said that, yes, you also lose weight when you acquire the condition. So the term was either you're touching the thing, which is crack, or you have the thing. I wasn't so overly worried because I knew myself. But I said, so I was not touching the thing and I don't have the thing. I'm sure of that. So I'm saying, well, this must be a medical condition. So I was worried. I was depressed. Like most of us men, afraid to go to the doctor. I don't want to hear about it. But I continued losing weight. I couldn't fit in my clothes. And I said, one evening about 5, I said, I need to go and see what's wrong with me. I went to a private hospital. In about half hour, the doctor came back to me and said, young man, welcome to diabetes, right? My sugar was at 585. He took me and he referred me to the main hospital. It was the Belize City Hospital. I was given a bed. I had to call my wife and said, I'm at the hospital, by the way, I'm in a bed. Bring some stuff for me. As far as I'm concerned, I was feeling okay. The following morning, after I hooked up with all the IVs, I was sick the following morning, right? From 585, I think I went down to about 200 plus. Right? Then I felt I was sick. The doctor came back, ran a ward. He think that I was able to go home and cope with the condition. And he said, this condition will eat you like a termite from the inside. You need to take care of yourself, right? Here's some medication you'll be taking. I was given metformin and glyburide, 2 oral medication, and I was sent home. I had no diabetes education. I didn't know anything about the condition until about a couple months after. I heard that there was a Belize Diabetes Association. I joined the association and I started learning of the condition. Eventually, I had a passion for diabetes. Now I'm living this condition, right? I became the assistant president, and eventually I became the president of the Belize Diabetes Association. But for me, key is education. When you don't know, right? It's a big thing, right? You could get depressed. And when one person in the family is living with diabetes, then everybody is affected as well. I always preach that we won't have several pots being cooked. In a home, we'll have one pot. And as I said yesterday, you eat portion size, right? But for us, we like to eat quite a bit. But when you're living with diabetes, you need to be disciplined. That is one of the key with this condition, discipline, right?
So I want to give you all to give another round of applause. This is really the strength of civil society and what we're all trying to do and achieve. And the last person who's going to give their story is Tara Lisa. As I said, TL, as I very affectionately call her, is technical advisor to the HCC in our Views, Our Voices program. In 2016, we in fact started to initiate a part of our functioning under the HCC Faces of NCDs. And this is part of that whole process. It's slow, but it is something that we feel that is important. And NCD Alliance, as I said, has identified putting people first as a priority call. And you know, as I'm listening to all of this, as in so many, on so many I don't know if he recalls that in 2011, or was it 2011 or is it 2014 at the UN, Sir George made the comment, until such time as men are on the streets with placards saying, I am unable to have an erection because I've got diabetes, because the government has not treated diabetes care properly in my country, we won't really get that kind of emotion and input. And I've always remembered that comment, because of course it was a very bold and dramatic comment in that setting. And I think what we're hearing here in terms of how this whole chronic disease issue affects individuals is so important. So I'm now going to ask Tara Lisa to tell her story, and then thank everyone. Tara?
Thank you. Thanks, Sir Trevor. So I have some good news, and the good news is that my father just passed away, but he was 97, and he was diagnosed with diabetes at the age of 40. So you have two people here that are going to have very, very long, amazing lives. And he didn't die. He didn't die of diabetes at the age of 97. So my story, I'm raising my hand in the we too. I have some notes because my brain doesn't work as well as I would like it to work anymore. It will eventually, but not right now. I'm one of all of us. I'm not very special. I have an NCD or live with people that have NCDs like everybody else. But I'm supposed to be a face of a NCD and tell you my story. So here we go. In 2014, at the end of 2014, I was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. Between the end of 2014 and the early sort of April of 2015, I did 9 cycles of chemotherapy. On May the 2nd, 2015, I had a lumpectomy and I removed 15 lymph nodes. I then had radiotherapy for about 4 weeks. And then I was done. And then I thought I really, really was done. I continue on 2 IV drugs every 3 weeks, Herceptin and Perjeta, because I was HER2 positive. Progesterone and estrogen negative. Now, if you asked me any of this information at the beginning of 2014, I would have been like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't know what HER2 is. I don't know what progesterone or estrogen drivers of breast cancer are. I know that they're hormones, but I didn't know they were related to breast cancer. I thought it was fine. So I continued taking my 2 IV drugs until last summer. So at the end of June last year, I got some really bad headaches. And I didn't even go to the doctor. I just called the doctor up and he said, you need to go get a brain scan. Why do I need to go and get a brain scan? He said, you need to go and check what's going on in your brain. Okay, so I went and I found what I affectionately call my golf ball. I had a metastatic brain tumor the size of a golf ball that had grown in my brain. So, in July of last year, I had open brain surgery and we removed the golf ball. And then in August, I had gamma knife surgery to clean up the cells that were still remaining. Had a lot of side effects. I stayed in the hospital for about 3 weeks. And I still have side effects. I still walk with a cane. I still am wobbly and imbalanced. I still have a shaky left side. I was wearing glasses for a while and I didn't have to wear them, thank goodness, after December. Lots and lots of side effects, but I thought that was also the end. I went for a 6-month checkup and last month I had more gamma knife to my brain because the cells had started to grow back. So I am now definitely living with an NCD. And not just surviving it, but I hope that I can say that I'm thriving with it. What I want to tell you a little bit is about me before my diagnosis. So who is Tarlisa? I'm a very ordinary Caribbean girl who grew up in Trinidad. I was born in Guyana, and I now live in Barbados, having moved there for work in 2011 to work with the Inter-American Development Bank on helping the governments in the region to improve how business is done around the region. So I worked on, in the 6 years, over 100 projects. I'm a doer, I'm a thinker, I'm an implementer. This is not really supposed to happen to me. What about the risk factors? I was never, ever a smoker. I don't drink, well, kind of every now and again, but I'm not a drinker. I exercised every day, whether it was running or yoga or tennis or swimming Carlisle Bay. I exercise every single day, right? I grew up in a house where, because my father had diabetes, we didn't cook with salt or sugar or fat. I'm a certified health and nutrition coach. So I was drinking my green juice, which I still do up to today. I was drinking my green juices. I was eating organic food. I don't eat meat. I don't eat chicken. This wasn't really, I wouldn't say that I'm high risk, and I wouldn't say that I'm even medium risk. And I still here sit as somebody that got cancer. But why am I telling you about the risk factors? Because we're talking a lot about prevention activities, and while they didn't prevent me from getting cancer, I can tell you that they have helped me over the last 2 or 3 years in treating my cancer, because I'm better off because I don't smoke and I exercise, and I try and eat organic food, and that's helped me to just survive the chemotherapy, the radiation, just feeling better every day. The other thing is I'm not genetically predisposed to cancer, so really I just was unlucky, right? The thing is, in terms of sharing information with people about prevention as well, it's really important. Things like the nutrition and how you live your life, because those are life choices that I made. People don't make them because they don't know about them. I used to be doing chemotherapy with people that were having chocolate cake and lots of sugar and French fries and things like that. And I couldn't say to them, not such a good idea to be eating that. Because how can you tell a cancer patient that's feeling pretty bad as they are already, you shouldn't be having the one thing that tastes kind of nice. You can't tell them that, but actually somehow we do have to tell them that. So my main messages are basically to tell you things that would make a difference to me as a patient in terms of the things that you've been discussing over the last 2.5 days. And I wanted to shift the focus a little bit from just prevention to actually treatment. So access to medicines. Something has to be done in terms of access to medicine. While I was doing my chemotherapy, I was actually living in Barbados and traveling to Trinidad to do the chemo there because that's where I was diagnosed. One of the drugs that I was taking for the last 5 cycles is called Persaud or pertuzumab. When I was doing that in Trinidad, you had to get a minister's permit to import it into Trinidad and Tobago. We applied for a permit and I didn't get it until the last cycle. So what did I do? I live in Barbados, in which you don't have to get a minister's permit. So I got the drugs there. And talking about technical barriers to trade, well, I stepped over those and I smuggled the drug into Trinidad so that I could get it. Because if not, I would have died, right? Forget about experimental drugs. They're just not even available. Cost of care. I was very lucky. I took a decision in 2008 to take out insurance for myself, health insurance for myself. If I hadn't done that, I would be dead because the cost of drugs is way, way, way too high. Every month, not even every month, every 3 weeks, my cost of my 2 IV drugs now is approximately $7,000 US. I have no idea, and I don't want to know what the cost of my surgeries were because without the insurance, I honestly would be dead, full stop. Access to information. My mother is my hero because she knows more about cancer than any other person that I know that is not a doctor. She has read everything about drugs, about treatment, about absolutely everything. And the thing is that there isn't any information, really serious information, when you get a diagnosis. Whether it is cancer, whether it is diabetes, whether it is hypertension, the lack of information is awful. And it comes down to, you know, what do you do when your nails turn blue from chemotherapy? What do you do when you lose all your hair? How do you learn to write again when your brain is not working? It's all these different kinds of things that we don't have any information to, much less nutrition information. And we talk about a holistic approach to these diseases, but I want to talk about also a holistic approach to care and care coordination, because there isn't any coordination. I'm my coordinator. I've had to go between the oncologist and the surgeon and my GP and the person that did the scan to take a report here or take a report there or tell them what was going on. Nobody talked to each other. And when you're looking at a person that is sick and there's also having to be the administrator of their care, it's very, very, very difficult. So we have to look at it holistically, and doctors actually need to talk to each other. I apologize for saying this, but doctors need to stop tripping over their own egos and talk to each other and put your patient at the center of your care, because that patient is the one that's more important. Consider non-Western medicine, and I don't want to say alternative medicine because I don't really like to call it alternative. It's alternative to us Western medicine practitioners. But Eastern medicine and Eastern philosophies have been available for a very, very long time with a lot of experience and a lot of research. And when you are like me, in that you don't have a lot of risk factors that you can adjust, you don't have a lot of changes to lifestyle to make that can make your prognosis any better, looking at non-Western medicine is something that you have to do. It's something that, it's the only thing that I can pull at, because Western medicine has just said, oh, well, we can give you drugs, but that's about all that we can do. So don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. There are lots of quacks, yes. And there are lots of charlatans, yes. And maybe this is an area that we need to look at more regulation and more real understanding of, because actually there's a lot of medicine that we don't look at. And don't, in saying that, doctors, I have learned, don't have all of the answers. And we have to trust ourselves. That really is one of the things that I have learned. After my first brain surgery, I spent 2 months throwing up because the vomit center in my brain had been bruised. And they didn't know what to give me. I went to neurologist after neurologist. I went on 8 different kinds of medication. They even gave me speed. They said, astronauts use speed. We give it to astronauts to help them stop throwing up in space. Well, it didn't work with me. Not only didn't it work, I think I must be the only person that was given a hallucinogenic drug and didn't have hallucinations. I wish I had, but I didn't. I wore a scopamine patch for about 5 months, and then I weaned myself off of that patch, not with the doctor's help, because I could not bear wearing it. So instead of sending me to the air and out into space for help, it was actually the sea that helped, because the scopamine patch is a seasickness badge. So I am reading a book called Radical Remission at the moment, and that's a book that really looks at what helps non-traditional helpers basically to cancer patients. And so I would suggest maybe that we need more research into different ways rather than just the medicine. And I'm going to close off and say, look, at the end of the day, I'm an ordinary person with an NCD. I'm not supposed to be sitting here because I really did think that I was a doer and a thinker and an implementer, and I got frustrated with government, and I got frustrated with the private sector, and I got frustrated with everybody and all of the public service the servants that I work with every single day. And everybody has been amazing, because when they figure out that you're going through something, people become very empathetic and very, very sympathetic. And I've discovered that the world is full of people that are full of a lot of love and a lot of care. In looking forward to the high-level meeting, one thing I would say is that outcome documents are outcome documents. And I have written them myself. I worked on the 5th Summit of the Americas in Trinidad. I was one of the writers of the declaration. And I was one of the people that negotiated with the 34 governments around the region to put what was in that declaration there. And we can say all that we want. The leaders get into a room. They don't really listen that much to civil society or read the civil society declarations. They have urgent matters. They have their own agendas. You could have an international crisis that happens one day before the high-level meeting, and that high-level meeting is just a side event that we hope that people will listen to. So the advice that the ambassador gave in terms of getting the language to the coordinators and to the writers way before the high-level meeting is the best advice I think that anybody could give. Get it in there before, because they're much less likely to take it out. Don't fight for something to be put in at that stage. It should already be there. And then as an outcome document, it's simply an outcome document, and we have many of them. We have OAS outcome documents, we have UN resolutions, we have CARICOM documents, and they sit on shelves and they don't do very much. And at the end of the day, to give a document life, what happens after the document is signed is what's really, really important. And that's what's in all of our hands here. And that's what I would also say that you should focus on.
So I don't think Katie will object to my making this comment. I think most of you now will understand why it is that very recently Tara Lisa was invited to be a member of the NCD Alliance Global Advisory Committee for 2018 on the NCD Alliances, Our Views, Our Voices. So you can see why. Any questions or any quick comments maybe for about 5 minutes? Quick comments or questions or?
Actually, I was just going to ask Dennis so I'm looking at this all evidence that I thank you guys for opening, I guess, the eyes of many of us. And I'm speaking from a
that intersectoral group, which is the Ministry of Health, which sometimes we really think we have it down pat, and we really don't. So one of the things I've been actually struggling for, and I hear all of you reflected today, is for capacity building among those of us who give care. We do not understand you. We do not understand what you're feeling. Oftentimes you don't have the capacity to even do a proper interview to know where you are. What do I ask you? Or first of all, what do I let you tell me? We really need to take care of that sector of the intersectoral parties. Because unless I can hear you, I don't know what you're feeling. And the truth is, the only thing I remember from medical school is my professor of surgery telling us that there are no diseases, there are only patients. That's the only thing I remember from medical school. And something I applied every day. So I want us to remember that we have to focus on building the capacity of all caregivers. Thank you.
Just one last quick comment or question in the interest of time.
Yes. Congratulations. You know, you, I guess, brought us back to why we're here today. I think one thing jumped out from your presentation and an earlier presentation, which I don't think may have been reflected in the document, and which was a sticking point I recall from 2011, is access to medicines and technology. Not only the procurement aspect, but the cost of the drug. I haven't heard much about how do we get that cost down. HIV drugs used to cost persons $1,000 per month and used to be prohibitive. And I was just reminded of a personal experience where I had a helper, her, when they made a diagnosis of HIV, they said to the father, said, I'm not going to give any money towards that because she's going to die quickly. So I think access to drugs and technology, how do we move Herceptin, which is 1,000 something US per dose down, because, and also the equipment as well is going to burst the budget. And as you have mentioned, there are many persons which we have missed the boat with who do not have the risk factor, who we have to treat.
All right, so I think that's it. Thanks very much. I'm sure you want to give the panelists a hand.